All right, we are back talking NFL Draft 2023 with Dave Syvertsen of our lads. Of course, he's the senior draft analyst now. Dave, how's it going?
Much better than 2 weeks ago. Sorry for the little hiatus. I caught the flu for the first time in about 15 years, and it put me through the ground. And then my son got it and put him through the ground. So it's been a rough 2 weeks. I did not disappear. I'm hoping my voice will make it through. I'm stocked up on water over here. But I'm really glad to be back and talking prospects with you. I'm glad we got it done going early because it gave us a little buffer for something like that.
Yeah, we want to remind everybody out there because we have had, which we completely welcome everybody's comments and questions. Hey, what about these guys? How come they're not on your list? And as we said at the beginning, and we'll keep saying, these are really early lists, and they're only like 10 players we'll talk about. So especially the skill position areas, there's just so many guys that. There could be a guy that's like 28th on your list right now, Dave, that'll end up like 5th when it's all said and done. So
that's I wouldn't be too, pigeonhole yourself too much into rankings right now. I think if you're in the ballpark, that's really all we care about. I personally don't care that much where I have guys ranked right now. There's still a lot of tape to be watched and information to get, but. It also has something to do with the COVID is still spillover in terms of who's going to be declaring for the draft because
very confusing.
Everybody got another year of eligibility that was playing college football in 2020. So and not every school lists them the same. That's what I think confuses the public, where some guys are listed as a junior, but really it's their 4th year, and some guys are listed as a sophomore. But it's really their 3rd year because 2020 did not count against their eligibility. And so what you'll see guys that are either missing from the list because I don't think they're going to come out, or we just haven't gotten to them yet. But by mid-January, we'll have our list ready. And that's when I would really start to firm up the stacks and the rankings and the grades. So I wouldn't worry too much about it right now. Right now, we should all just be in information gathering mode.
And we're going to have more than enough updated shows. So like, for instance, we've already done like 10 quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. We will be adding to that list as we talk. So it's just, we had to start somewhere and with some players, but we again, if there's any players that you're wondering about, hey, why aren't they on the list? Let us know. And then Dave will let you know what he thinks about those players in the comment area. In the comment section. So right there, you can have a back and forth on a specific player that we did not talk about. So those were the skill position players that we started with. And even though it's been a few weeks, we've already seen, a couple of weeks of games. Like, for instance, we were talking about Blake Corum, and then here goes Edwards that just goes off. And we knew he's going to be a good player because of his receiving ability. But the point is that, and we're going to see bowl games and we're going to see playoff games. And this is going to give players an opportunity to step up that maybe nobody even thought that they would either be in a top 10 list or even be considered like a top prospect. Like you talked about the kid from Florida State, the running back that I haven't really heard much of that you think could be a really top prospect, but you have no idea if the kid's coming out or not.
Yeah. That's why you can't rush the scouting process, right? I think in this world that we live in, it's always like, all right, watch a guy for a little bit, make your opinion, and never change. Right now, I really try hard to just watch these guys as much as possible. Early season, mid-season, end of season. And like you just said, there's so much that changes in such a short amount of time that it's really not needed to really grade a kid right now. And I think really what's needed is just to watch more and listen more and try to get some input from guys. And we'll try to do that for you guys to the best of our ability.
Now on today's show, we have one more skill position, and that's tight end. Then we go into the trenches, offensive line. We've got tackles, we have guards, we have centers. And you can see on the board here, I have images of the top players in your group. And so we've got a center from Minnesota, we have a guard from Florida, and a tackle from Northwestern, and of course the tight end, which we're going to start with, and that's Meyer from Notre Dame. And I think, look, if you're a college football fan, you know about this kid. You've known about him for a couple of years. He's been one of the top tight ends in football, really, for the past few years. But he does look like as expected, he's getting a little bit better each year. He's refining his skills, especially as a as a blocker. And that's the one thing that initially you've seen a lot of tape early on and go, hey, even though he's big, he's not showing me much as a blocker. But that's definitely changed, I think, this season.
Yeah, Meyer is your prototype. When you're kind of creating a tight end in the factory, height, weight, speed, length, ability to line up in the slot, in line, he does it all. And I think that's one thing that's going to make everyone feel safe with him. I do see – I don't think there's a bona fide number one tight end in this class, meaning guys that stand out among
like
the others.
Pitts. Oh, you mean like – oh.
Right, there's no Pitts. There's no Vernon Davis. There's no – Travis Kelce was not a first-round pick, but I don't see that kind of athlete or difference maker in the passing game in this group. And I think where these tight ends go in the draft will be very much based on scheme and what teams are looking for out of the tight end position, right? You have the wide tight end, your traditional inline guy. You have your F tight end that is going to move in motion and line up in the slot and try to create things after the catch. And you can make a case that there's a couple other guys behind Meyer that are going to be better suited for that role. But if you are looking for your prototype wide tight end, he's going to be in line. He's going to be in the slot. We're going to move him around. I think he's the guy that will end up being. How high does he go? I think it's going to be more about supply and demand than how good he is, because there are a lot of average traits in his game. He's a good, not great blocker. He's a good, not great hands catcher. He's a good, not great guy after the catch. But add all those things up together, you have a quality starting tight end type grade in him, and someone that will probably start early on in his career. But what are you really expecting out of the upside here? You're probably looking at a Hunter Henry type, currently with the Patriots, originally drafted by the Chargers. Again, a guy that will.
So that means you don't believe there'll be a tight end drafted in the first round?
I would say I don't think there's going to be one in the top 20. Based on situations around the league, I think you could see one or two sneak in somewhere into the 20s, supply and demand. A lot of teams in the league are going to be looking for a tight end this year. And I think that if there's one that you had to gamble on that would end up being in the first round, in the 20s somewhere, it's going to be Meyer.
Yeah, he seems like you said, because he does seem like the safest bet.
Yeah.
A guy that that when you draft him, he's not going to be a flop.
Right.
Okay, maybe we know what his ceiling could be, but we know what we're getting, and we're going to be pretty comfortable with that.
And that's important. That's a really important thing for the tight end position. I actually think the tight end position is one of the hardest outside of quarterback and corner to play in the NFL out of college, because there is so much you need to learn at the pro level. You have to run routes, option routes. You have to block. You have to block defensive linemen. You have to block at the second level. There's just a lot you need to learn in a short amount of time. And Meyer, I think, is a guy that you are very confident he will come in, learn it pretty quickly, and be able to contribute in year one.
Let's now talk about your second-ranked tight end, and unfortunately, we haven't seen enough of him this season, and that's Luke Musgrave. Hey, look, all power to Jonathan Smith and Oregon State, because even without him, they've just kept winning. But he's a really good player. So talk about what is he the guy that when you're looking at it, when you compare him to Meyer? Yeah. Well, what's the difference between Musgrave and Meyer that makes Meyer a little bit better than Musgrave on your list?
You feel he's got more experience. I mean, Musgrave's going to come into the NFL with 15 career starts under his belt, and so there's just a lot of unknown. You don't have as much tape to look at and say, "Hey, he's proving that he can do this." And you want to see more than a season's worth of games before you throw someone into the NFL,
especially at that position.
Right, and Meyer's been a feature guy in that Notre Dame offense. Like, they were manufacturing touches for him on all levels of the route tree, where Musgrave, he was more of an accessory to the offense. He was never a focal point. But what I like about him, athletically, he has more juice than Meyer, right? To quote Dan Shonk, wait for the 40 to come out. Because this kid, he's going to run in the low 4.5s. And he's got the NFL body. And I'll tell you what, the NFL lineage, he's the son of former NFL quarterback and offensive coordinator Bill Musgrave.
That's a big plus.
It is. And it's a feather in the cap that a lot of kids don't have. I don't think that's ever a deal breaker. But I'll tell you what, when you're drafting, a young man to come in and be a professional, that's always a gamble, and that's often a make or break for a lot of these kids that come out of college. They don't work hard. They don't stay hungry. They feel like they've made it. Where a kid like Luke Musgrave, he's been around the lifestyle. He knows what it's like. He knows what it takes, more so than a lot of these kids. And I do think there's a lot of decision makers and coaches in the NFL that they're going to be confident he knows what's going to be expected of him. And throw in the talent, throw in the fact that he is a high-graded blocker, shows a lot of desire in that part of his game. And he's probably, when you're talking about height, weight, speed, he might have the best combination of traits in the class at the position. And for a league that is just capitalizing on quality tight ends, some teams do it so much better than others. If you can get this kind of athlete in the system, and he's got some drop issues that he's got to fix. His drop rate's a little too high. Just, again, doesn't have a ton of targets to his name. He has the potential to be the high potential to be the number one tight end in this class. If he had not hurt his knee this year, I think there was a close to 50% shot he could have been right up there with Meyer, if not ahead of him.
So he is, though, a little bit more riskier than Meyer.
Yes. There's just more unknown with him.
Yeah.
Now he's got a knee issue.
Higher upside, though.
Issue. So, yes, there is definitely a higher ceiling here, but probably a lower floor.
Okay, now we have to start talking about a couple, two particular schools that have incredible depth at the tight end position, especially with the top two.
Yeah.
Your number 3 is Darnell Washington from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first of all, okay, so Bowers was a true freshman last season.
Correct.
So he cannot come out this season.
Correct.
Okay, so that's something that no matter how much you like him, he can't come out. So
he will be a top 10 pick next year.
Yes.
Brock Bowers, unless something.
He's that next elite guy.
Yes.
That is going to be in the top 10 potentially.
That we don't have in this class. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. But Darnell Washington.
He's not eligible. Darnell Washington, also a former 5-star recruit, that he has a really rare blend of weight, length, and long speed. And I'll get into what I mean by long speed, but I just want to talk about the body first.
Okay.
And how it shows up as a blocker. You're not going to draft a tight end in the first round to block, but if you have that feather in your cap, it means something. And I think these power offenses, I see him being such an ideal fit for a team like Tennessee, where their tight end is a 6th offensive lineman for the Derrick Henry offense. But when they need you to run routes, you can go out there and get the job done. I'm not saying he's going to be drafted by the Titans, but a team like that would be so good because he truly does block. If we're just going to grade blocking ability in the running game, he grades better than half the linemen in the class. And he's 275 pounds with 35-plus-inch arms.
Yeah.
And he dominates guys at the second level. When he gets to a linebacker or safety, it looks like he's playing. It looks like a senior in high school playing junior high football. He just overwhelms guys, and he rarely loses any blocking engagement that he's in. And now, he's got one of the best yards after catch numbers in the country for the position. And it's because he's so hard to get on the ground. If you remember what Brandon Jacobs looked like as a running back when he played, not a great running back, but he looked different, right? Because he was just massive.
Yeah.
That's what he looks like with the ball in his hands. He just runs guys over. He never goes down on first contact, stiff arms, lowers his shoulder, 275 pounds. And now he's not the most sudden guy in the world. And it's easy to see on tape. He doesn't turn around to the ball very quickly, struggles to get in and out of breaks as a route runner. But once he gets going, he's got credible 4.6 speed. And you talk about this kind of just vertical threat, blocker, receiver. I think he's a day one start in the NFL if he gets drafted into the right situation.
I'm going to bring up a player that these players come along a lot in college sports, and they're so gifted athletically, and you think they're going to be superstars, but all of a sudden, a couple of years later, who was that guy that you just forget them, and you're right. Eric Gilbert, I think, might be that guy.
Yeah,
and I know it's not about anything devious. He's not a bad seed. There just seems to be, from what I've heard and the people I've talked to, there just seems to be he's dealing with personal issues, and we're in an era right now our society, there's a lot of that going around where
Yep.
where a lot of young kids having a hard time with life, and
Yes.
he just seems to be in that category. And it's unfortunate because he's a very talented football player, but he has to find a way to play a full season in college before the end,
Right.
because he's never going to get drafted. That doesn't mean he can't eventually make it in the NFL if he figures things out with his personal life. He's
Right.
so talented. But yeah, hopefully sooner, maybe it's next year. Maybe he'll get more time with Washington gone. Maybe that'll be a good year to see if he can actually put it all together.
Yeah, and the talent and physical package that kid brings to the table, that Gilbert brings to the table, you can count on one hand how many times you're going to see that over the course of a couple of years. So he has that in him that most other players will never reach, right? They're not all of a sudden going to become the athlete that he is. All he needs to show is just a string of quality tape. It doesn't need to be a full season even. If there will be someone in the league, and then we're talking about next season if he goes back to Georgia, which I'm assuming he will, that if he can just put together 6, 7, 8 quality games next year, that's going to be enough for him, because that position, if you can really find like a blue goose at that position, that can change an offense. And every team is going to be looking for it. Every team is currently looking for it. And the success rate on high draft picks at tight end is pretty low. But I think teams know that how valuable they can be. And Gilbert is always going to be the most talented guy in the room. If you put him in a room with tight ends, it'll be the question, can he put enough quality skill set on tape? And yeah, if he stays there at Georgia next year, I mean, that 1-2 punch of him and Bowers is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
All right. Now, before we get to your fourth pick, we're going to talk about a player on the same team that is not on the list. So, Brant Kuithe, why isn't he on the list? Because, I mean, look, I like both of these guys a lot. But I don't know. I mean, there's parts of Kuithe I like over Kincaid, but I see what you're saying with Kincaid. He's also pretty awesome. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just 1-2 punch that Utah, we might be looking back and wondering, how did Utah have those guys at the same time? But what's up with Kuithe in your mind?
I mean, Kuithe, it's just the size. He's going to measure in around 6'2", 220 pounds. And to me, it's kind
That's
of like
more
a
slot receiver.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and is he athletic enough to be considered a true slot? He'll find a spot. He'll get drafted, but it's hard to really put a guy like that ahead of someone that has the size and has just as much athletic ability and ball skills. You have to, if you're going to play tight in the NFL, you need to have some juice. You need to have some power. You need to be able to at least stick to guys at the second level. He's not going to be a guy that you're putting next to a tackle and telling him to go block the defensive end. We know that. But if you're not going to have enough size, there needs to be a true standout trait in your game. And I don't see the standout trait other than, hey, quality pass catcher, does drop the ball a little too much. He can make things happen after the catch. But if he goes out and runs a 4.5 or below, then all right, now we're talking about something here. But I don't think he has that kind of explosive trait to his game. I think he looks like someone that's going to be considered a better college player than an NFL player. And that happens a lot, right? Where guys just don't translate. Their game doesn't translate. The power, the speed, the size does not translate unless he gets put into a system that is really made for him, a role that is really made for him. And there are some playmakers, some play callers in the NFL that do that much better than others.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I think his situation more than others will be very much based on who drafts him.
Let's talk about Kincaid, because he has been phenomenal this season for Utah. And I got to be honest with you, I might have him, if I had my list, I might have him at the top.
Yeah. I mean, that and then in my notes that I originally sent over, I said you can make a case that he's the top pass catcher at the position. He's the top guy. He's the guy that makes the most impact in an NFL passing attack right away. And just that fact alone, that might be enough for some teams to say, all right, he's tight end number one, because we don't care that much about the blocking. We need someone that's going to make plays in the passing game. I think there's teams that have a quality tight end right now that are still going to look his way, because he won't be a wide tight end. He will be the F tight end. He will be the guy that you move around in motion and put out in the slot and try to create mismatches. And he's 6'6", 241, 33-plus inch arms, 10-plus inch hands. That is the frame of a guy that you want playing tight end. And then you look at the way he moves. And the most impressive trait to me, there's two things. He doesn't drop the ball ever. And the way he snaps upfield immediately after he gets the catch, the league is in love with that right now. What can you do after the catch? We will set up our passing game for guys to make things happen after the catch. You get the ball out in under 2 seconds, get open with your short area quickness, which he'll do, catch the ball consistently, which he'll do, and then immediately get upfield. That's the standout trait that I think you're right. There could be a case that he will end up being the top guy, especially if he works out well.
Couldn't he be? He could be like a Travis Kelce.
Yeah, Kelce, yes. I think Kelce has more versatility in his game in that he can be an inline guy and hold his own. Kincaid gets ragdolled as an inline blocker. I don't care who he's up against. His best opponent, Florida, tossed him around like a little kid. So I just don't think he's ever going to transform himself into, that Kelce. But I think he could be a better version of someone like Evan Engram, where he's always going to be a little on the too weak side to be an inline blocker. But his ability to make plays in traffic and come down with the ball, which Engram does not do, I think that's the guy that's going to be making plays like Kelce in the passing game.
All right, now let's talk about another team that has a variety of tight ends. Schoonmaker, who's on your list at number 5 for Michigan. Oh, and by the way, we're recording this on Friday, so Kincaid's got the game tonight. So we'll see what happens. It's a big game, big stage. So we'll see what happens there. Schoonmaker. We know that he's been making big plays for Michigan in the second half of the season, especially with Eric All out. As soon as as soon as he's been gone, it's up to Schoonmaker's playing time. What makes Schoonmaker? Because as a Michigan fan, not until this year did I notice anything kind of special. I mean, nice player. He can block if he's at Michigan. That's definitely number one. And it seems like every time he gets the opportunity to catch the ball, he gets the job done. Not that he's a freak athletically, but he just seems like a really solid player.
Yeah, that's exactly the word. It's just solid. You feel safe with him. And, now we're talking about where we are in my tight end stack. We're talking about like round 3, round 4 area. And that's the kind of guy that you want as your number 2 tight end, because it's a high injury rate position in the league. They get hurt a lot just because they're in the mix a lot, right? They take a lot of contact over the middle after the catch. They're in the trenches, right? You always want to have a guy on your depth chart that you feel good about. Like, all right, hey, you're in now. Number 1 guy's out. We're not going to have to change the offense or supply all this help to the blocker if you go in. That's why I think his traits, they translate to the next level very well, because he can do a little bit of everything kind of well, right? Do I think he's ever going to be a dominant pass catcher, yard after catch athlete? No, he's not sudden enough. I don't think there's an explosive trait, but his footwork is really good. That's something I noticed on tape this year more than what I watched a lot of tape on Michigan prior to this season. And I just remember seeing some balance issues with his route running. That's improved mightily throughout this year. And I think it helps him get open. I trust him in traffic when the ball. So he's never going to be a guy that gets a lot of separation as a route runner. So if that's going to be the case, you need to be able to be tough in traffic when the ball's coming your way. And he's shown to do that. High effort blocker, pretty productive blocker too. So do I think he's going to be a starting caliber tight end in the NFL? I don't, but I do feel good about him being my number 2 guy, knowing that he's going to see a lot of snaps.
Now, don't you think, and look, this is why getting injured really hurts players, but Eric All, I just feel like, now look, we don't know what's going to happen when he comes back from injury and how that's going to affect his workouts and so forth, but he was progressing to the point where this was going to be a breakout season for him, and I thought that he could end up as a day 2 potentially pick.
Absolutely.
He was a 4-star recruit. He's an excellent blocker to go along with. He really has shown the ability to be a good receiver as well. So is that the only reason right now he's not in your top 10?
Yeah. I mean, I have Eric All's spine surgery, that's
not your typical surgery.
Thought.
No,
he might even come back. Right now, from what I've read, I did some research online. I don't have any sources there for this, but I think he's going to be back at Michigan next year. That was another thought I had with him not putting in the top 10. But that spine surgery, that can be a deal breaker for some teams. I mean, you look at Damone Clark, who it's worked out for him in Dallas, the linebacker. He's now seeing significant snaps. He was, without a doubt, a day 2 pick.
Yes.
But because, I think his was more neck than spine.
Okay.
It bumped him down to the end of the draft. And they didn't know if he was going to play this year. Like, that was the initial preliminary report on him. He would not play in 2022. Now he's on the field. It's worked out for Dallas. I think he's going to be a big part of their team down the stretch. Eric All, his grade will be so dependent on the medicals. And the teams really get a deep dive there at the combine. If he declares, if he comes out, that's when the teams are really going to get that final piece of information on him. But my film outlook on him prior to this season was Noah Fant, current tight end of the Seahawks. Like, I thought he was that kind of athlete, and he could have made that kind of impact on a pro passing game, if not even better. So it's tough. He'd be a tough guy to advise. If we were advising on him to go back or not, it's tough because I still think there's going to be a team out there that can look at some of his past tape and, assuming he works out well and he recovers from the surgery, he could sneak into early day 3 because of the upside. But if there's still lingering questions, teams might prefer to say, hey, prove it to us next year on the field that you're back to where you were, and then we'll draft you in 2024.
All right, let's move on with the rest of the list. Davis Allen, are we talking about more of a blocking tight end than anything?
We are. The Clemson coaches say he's the best blocking tight end they've ever had, but he's having a career year with as a receiver this year. I mean, I think that if there's one tight end that has up to stock the most via play on the field in this season, it's Davis Allen, making catches away from his body, in traffic, a lot of touchdowns, high difficulty plays. He's coming down with it. He has his career drop rate is under 3%. Incredible number for a tight end. So I think the league is going to like him a lot. You feel safe with every part of his game, and there's still margin for him to accrue as a receiver. Like, I don't think his true upside was truly shown at Clemson as a pass catcher.
Sam Laporta. Now, I've spoken to several Iowa beat guys, and they kind of agree with what I've seen, and that is that, yes, Iowa is like a factory lately of putting out these incredible tight end prospects and NFL players. But Sam Laporta, he's not one of those guys. He's not anywhere near like you just mentioned, Noah Fant. That's not Sam Laporta.
Right. Yeah, he's going to measure in pretty smaller than average. And again, I've talked about this with you a few times. It matters, right? It might not matter to the fans, but it matters to the league. And he's going to measure in on the very small side, considering the position. However, teams are going to view him as an F guy, a guy that they move around in the backfield sometimes. Call him an H-back if you want, right? And that is where he excels because his short area quickness and his ability to block on the move, especially against quicker defenders, second-level guys, third-level guys, it's a weapon. So I always imagine a team like San Francisco getting their hands on him with how much they move guys around and how much they create matchups for their players. I think if he gets put into the right system, he'll be a productive player. But not every team's going to view it that way. Not every team's going to use a guy like that. They don't have a role like that. And under 50% of his snaps have been in line. And there's a reason behind that. He can't hang in there. It's the length. He can't get his hands on guys, especially DNs. And so then you go into the explosive traits, right? Is he an explosive athlete? He's not. Has he had a lot of production? He hasn't. So even though I personally like him as a blue-collar guy that I would want somewhere on my team, I think you're gonna have to weigh it properly with where you think he'll actually go in the draft, and I'm gonna project probably a day 3, maybe round 5 area. Okay,
well, speaking of athletes, you mentioned Laporta may not be one, but the next tight end, Josh Wiley, is one.
Yeah. Yes. Wiley's going to be a sub 4.6 guy, and that's fast for a tight end. He also will have length issues, and that does show up on tape. They don't put him in line that often either. They have a couple tight ends there. There's another one there I think will be a priority free agent. But Wiley is someone that if he gets the ball in space or you send him vertical on seam routes, he'll make a difference. You need to account for a guy like this when he's on the field. And I think that's a big part of drafting a tight end that's going to impact your passing game. It's not just about the production. It's about scaring the defense into really accounting guys for you. Because if he goes up the field, he does have the ability to take the top off if you overlook him initially. Most linebackers will not be able to run with him. But on the negative side, most defensive ends and outside linebackers will have an easy time getting rid of him as a blocker. They're just going to kind of swat him away like a gnat. So, again, similar to Laporta, maybe even similar to Kincaid, he's going to need the right role. And more importantly, he's going to have to avoid the wrong role. Because if you think he's going to come in and be, Dalton Schultz, where he's going to help, he's going to be your every down wide tight end, your Cole Kmet, who's starting to blossom a little bit in Chicago. He's not that guy. So I hope for his sake that the right team gets his hands on him.
Next up, Cameron Latou from Alabama, and he had a really big 2021.
Yeah.
And, of course, so did Bryce Young winning the Heisman. He had 8 touchdowns. But the really intriguing about this kid is the fact that he came in as an edge rusher, a defensive prospect that turned into a tight end and, like, overnight found his calling. Now, this year's stats aren't as good as last year, but what do we got here?
Confusing. I'm a little confused by his tape this year. I was expecting a lot more. Earlier I said Davis Allen is probably the guy that boosted his grade, his stock, whatever you want to call it, the most by his play. I think Latou is the guy that has probably dropped down the most via the 2022 tape. His production has gone way down, like you said, even though he's getting more looks in the passing game. It's just not there, and there's a lot less wide receiver talent on that team. So I was kind of hoping, maybe put a little unfair expectation that he would rise to the occasion, and he just kind of seems pedestrian. He plays a little tight, doesn't have a lot of looseness in his hips, has a hard time getting his feet off the ground as a route runner, doesn't always come back to the ball. I mean, you can list if you think he does have very soft hands. I love the catching mechanics, good ball skills, good coordination, good timing. I just wish I saw a little bit more aggression in his game, and I thought I would see more of that, considering he used to be a defensive player.
Okay, so, well, at least, though, he has that, in a way, it might be a positive, that teams can feel like, okay, he's not a finished product yet, so we can still work with him, and again, it only takes one coach, one scout, one general manager that says, okay, we can work with this guy.
Right, yeah. And, I mean, he'll certainly get drafted. Yeah. There's no question. If anything, I might be lower on him than the norm, but there's no question he'll be drafted.
All right, now I'm going to go into players that were not on your initial list that I am intrigued by. Give me your take. We'll start with Isaac Rex from BYU. So Rex had a huge 2020 with Zach Wilson at quarterback. 12 touchdowns. And so, matter of fact, coming into this year, I believe he had 15 career touchdowns, but 12 in the Zach Wilson year. Now, he's got a good quarterback here now in the last couple of years. So it's not like things have dropped off considerably, but still, Zach Wilson is a top 5 quarterback. And he seems to be a decent run blocker as well. But tell me, what is it about Rex that you like or don't like?
Well, I like the frame. I think I have him at 6'5", 246, right? Good arm length, good hand size. So he checks all those boxes. I didn't feel like he was that creative after the catch. When I talked earlier about Dalton Kincaid and how natural he was to catch and move upfield, I see a little bit of a hesitation in Rex's game, and that always concerns me with wide receivers and tight ends, because the margin at the next level, how fast things happen, how fast guys are on you after the ball, there isn't time to adjust yourself, locate running lanes, and go. It's got to have a natural feel to it. And I just don't see it in his game. I have a late round grade on him right now. I think, if I remember correctly, I do think he got a Senior Bowl invite.
Okay.
So that will be a big weekend for him, a big week, I should say, for him. And I think he's probably one of those tight ends that right now I have like a late round, if a preferred free agent grade on, that if he has a good Senior Bowl week, a good workout, he could probably get into the top of day 3.
What I do like about him is he does seem to be a good red zone guy, a guy where you can throw the ball up, he can make the catch, and that's where he comes up with a lot of these touchdowns.
Right.
So
yeah, And it's funny when you look at production from a guy that went number 2 overall when Zach Wilson was playing there. It's like a catch-22. Was it more Wilson or was it more Rex? And was it just, did he get more looks than other guys in that kind of situation? Who was he competing for targets with at BYU at the time? Not many people can name wide receivers who were on that team when Wilson was playing quarterback. And, he took advantage of the opportunities that were given to him. And I think that there's going to be a good opportunity for him at the Senior Bowl. I'm pretty sure he got the invite. I have to kind of confirm that. But yeah, the baseline tools are there. It's does he develop the skill set, and are teams confident he can add enough bulk and enough power to make an impact as a blocker?
Is there a tight end? And let me ask, because this kind of falls along the same question regarding, is there a tight end that might be like a sleeper that you're like, yeah, you know what? He didn't really catch my eye coming into the process or coming into the season. But all of a sudden, you know what? I'm starting to like him. Maybe if I see some more film, I'll like him even more.
There is one. He's from Florida State. His name's Cameron McDonald. And I had him written up prior to the year. When I say written up, just like he was on the watch list.
Okay.
And early in the year, saw a couple of things I liked, moving around, catching the ball in traffic, some good long speed. But he's grown on me every time I've watched Florida State from multiple angles, not just as a receiver, as a yard after catch guy, but as a blocker as well. And start to look into some of the numbers, the measurables. I think he's got the length that teams want. And if he goes out and has a good workout, which based on just watching his game tape, the vertical speed that he showed against Florida last week, even, that's a guy that I think could kind of come out of nowhere. Not that it really exists anymore because there's so much information out there, but he's someone that I could see really taking a big jump from here.
Okay. What about the kid from South Dakota State, Tucker Kraft? Is he the top tight end FCS prospect?
For sure. I think he'll be the first FCS prospect drafted. Cody Mock, the offensive lineman from North. Yeah, I think he'll be the first. The first FCS guy. I did not have him on my list because I didn't think he was going to come out. He was hurt this year. So I just figured a kid from that kind of program, but the league loves him. The height, weight, speed, the aggression to the ball. He might be one of the more aggressive guys going up and getting the ball, and he has the vertical and the speed to beat almost everyone that's going to cover him. Right? He can run with safeties. He's much more athletic than linebackers. But his biggest jump is it's a tall ask for someone from FCS to come in and play physically the power game against the NFL linemen and linebackers. So whoever drafts him will probably have to view him as a receiver only early on, and then try to progress his power and strength presence and be more of an every down guy in his second year.
Well, just take a look at what's his name from the Eagles.
Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I interviewed Goddard on this network when the year he came out, and so we definitely liked him, and there was a lot to like about him. But and look, he was behind a really good player, Zach Ertz. Yeah, so it wasn't like, but still, it took him a little while. And you have the combination of playing in the FCS and then playing a position, as you said before, that's very tough to adapt in the NFL.
Yeah, it's a really hard, if you really go back and look at all the tight ends, like their first year, maybe even 2 years for a lot of them, it's rare to see a tight end come in right away and play a lot of snaps at a high level. Some get forced into the role because of what's going on around them. But in terms of them really reaching their peak, it takes them a little bit longer than some of the receivers and running backs and even the quarterbacks.
A couple other players that I was looking at before the season started that's not on your list is Ford from Louisville and Ryan Jones from East Carolina. Are those guys kind of guys that have a shot?
Yeah, I think they're more fullback types just based on their dimensions. Okay. I like Jones from East Carolina. He's a fun kid to watch. Drops have been a little bit of an issue this year, but take that out of it. I just don't think he's going to fit the size requirements that a lot of teams have for the position. Okay. But again, if not everyone uses a fullback anymore, but the teams that do, I think that's where he's going to land. Will he get drafted? I would say probably 50-50. And Ford from Louisville, same deal. I think he has a little bit more size to work with, if I remember correctly. I have him as a late round guy right now. I'm hoping he gets an all-star game invite because I would like to see him in more traditional tight end roles. The Louisville offense didn't have him do that often. So again, just a lot of unknown with him, and compared to some of these other guys.
And the last one, and he's on your, other list.
Yeah.
But he could end up in the top 10, and he's going to be on stage Saturday night against the undefeated Michigan Wolverines, and that's Payne Durham. And he's had a nice season, very nice season. O'Donnell's, it's interesting because we didn't talk about O'Donnell because he's really not a top prospect, but hey, he's a talented kid, and maybe he sticks in the NFL as a number 3, that kind of thing. And maybe even upgrades to a number 2 at some point. And then the other kid we didn't talk about at Purdue is Charlie Jones. And again, I understand why we didn't talk about him, but that's the type of player we said in the beginning of the show that who knows if he runs really well, which is possible he will, he could really shoot up a lot of boards because he's had a phenomenal season with Purdue. So interesting, but those 3 guys, but Durham he's at the top of that list of that trio though, as far as prospect wise.
Yeah, he's still relatively new to football. He was a big time lacrosse guy in high school, and I think he switched over to football as a senior. So you talk about just how long these guys play football leading up to this point, right before their NFL career. He's way behind the curve. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, that is a good thing because he still has a lot of margin to make up where a lot of guys are probably closer to their peak. And he's playing at a high level right now. So to say that he's playing at a high enough level for us to even be talking about him right now, and he still has a lot of learning to do, just on-field experience, that means something. The notes I have on him is that there's just like a slowness to his game. There's not like a lot of twitch, but I don't think it's just a lack of athletic ability. I think it's what we talked about. It's the experience isn't there yet. And because I've written down in my notes, there's a slowness to his game, and then he hurdles over defenders. Like he's the kind of guy that gets the ball in space, he will jump over you. There is an athlete in there. It's just he's not a sudden athlete. And to me, that is something that a team might seem like, if we can get this guy coached up for 2 years, put him on the practice squad, put him on the back end of the depth chart, we might have something here because his size, he meets all those requirements. He's there. He's been a productive player, like you said, and he's got the attitude too. He's got like the lacrosse hockey player type attitude that I like. And I think that's what tight ends need at the next level.
And I think he made one of those really exciting plays last year of the bowl game because he had the 2 touchdowns. He broke out in that game. And I'm pretty positive there was like one really dynamic play he made in that game. Yeah. So might have been one of those, hurdling plays that you're talking about.
I mean, so it's good to know that he has that ability because sometimes with some guys, they're just like, hey, they can't do it. They're not athletic enough. The second you see a glimpse of it, it's like, okay, the suddenness is not there. The twitch is not there because maybe he's still just he's thinking, not reacting. And that's sports 101, right? If you can get beyond the thinking component and just react, now we get to use these athletic gifts that you have. And the NFL is not the easiest place in the world to learn how to play football, but I think that he's showing enough on tape that he'll be a late round pick. Could with a really good workout, he could definitely move himself up, and someone's going to be getting something that's a little bit early on the progression curve. How high is that ceiling? I'm not sure, but he is definitely earlier on the progression curve than most guys.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up. Talking offensive linemen, and we also added, of course, tight ends. If you've been watching this entire show, we're going to be breaking them up, tight ends, offensive line, and the positions along the way. Keep that in mind because we already have our quarterbacks up, our running backs, our wide receivers. So now we're adding the offensive line and the tight ends within the next few weeks. The goal is to have all of the defensive course caught up. We'll start with edge rushers next. And we're going to probably break things into like edge rushers, and kind of edge rushers, outside linebackers kind of type, and then we'll have inside defensive tackles, linebackers. Try to break it into 3 more shows probably. Okay. I could even leave it up to you depending on how you want to do that with, because again, that's the thing that is so important nowadays. It used to be in the older days, used to be just defensive line, linebackers, and DBs. Now it's Well, you have to have edge rushers in one category, and no linebackers. Well, yeah, linebackers, but you got a certain group of linebackers here and the other ones there. It's maybe there should be a
It's tough.
hybrid position now too coming soon.
Yeah, I wish we could all just be on the same page with it. Then it'd be easy.
Yes.
But everyone's got their own spin on it,
Yes.
and it's a moving target. It changes every year. It's a moving target.
All right, so that's what's coming up. So take a look out for that, and we've got so much more. We're going to be just wall to wall NFL draft talk between now and the draft. We have so much lined up. Can't wait to get to it all. And our next project, though, is going to start in 2 weeks, and that is going to be our bowl reports. So make sure to check back for that. So we're going to have reports on every bowl game. So this way you get the opportunity when you watch a bowl game. I don't know whether or not you like to wager on it. If you don't, and you just like watching bowl games, well, we're going to give you an opportunity to zero in on a couple of players that will be playing in those bowl games that could be draftable players for next season. So that just adds to the fun of watching a bowl game. So we'll be doing that real soon. Dave, I appreciate it. As always, I hope
thank you, Greg.
Hope you get a little bit more healthier well, I know when we talk again in the next week or two, you'll be 100% healthy.
Yes, that's my plan. Next time we talk, I'm at 100%. Right now, I'm probably at around 80. But thanks for bearing with me if the voice started to give out a little bit.
That's fine. You're a trooper. Thanks, Dave.
All right, thanks, guys.